Welcome everyone, and a guten Yom Tov. Throughout the years of the Rebbe's Nesius, the primary way of how the Rebbe would communicate and transmit his herois and his Torah, his instructions and his teachings to us Chassidim would be through the Fabringens. Those who were Zeicha to be at a Fabringen walked away, recharged, and committed to carry out the Rebbe's will, whatever it may have been. Of course, the purpose of today's program, in addition to gain Yiddish through the Rebbe's Torah, in general throughout the years, in addition to that, the purpose of today's program is to strengthen our learning in the Rebbe's Torah and viewing of the Rebbe's Fabringens, which we are fortunate to have today. Just recently, Jem released the Fabringen of Yud Shevat Tashem and Aleph, and everyone is encouraged to watch it as much as your time permits. Until very soon, we will once again stand at the Rebbe's Fabringen. May it be Teikef and Miyad Mamish. Throughout the panel, you will be hearing many interesting facts, which many of you probably never knew before. So it would be kedai to write them down so you can remember, as well as to write down any questions that you may have throughout the panel to hand it up later on. Joining us today is Rabbi Meir Harlig. Rabbi Harlig is one of the select few individuals who was Zeicha to be in the Rebbe's presence from the beginning of the Nesius and on, in the manner of the Yamish V'Teichayil, the Erich Yamish Tevis. We have with us as well Rabbi Nuchem Kaplan, who is the director of the Americas Chinuch office, Rabbi Jacobson, who is a chazer, a maniach, and director of Avad Hanachas Atmim, Rabbi Michel Zeligson, a shpia in the Mesif Torah, and known for his mafteach for the Rebbe's Torah and beyond. Rabbi Mendel shliach of the Rebbe in Minnesota, who was flown down by the Avad for today's program. We'll start the program asking Rabbi Jacobson to please give us an overview of the Rebbe's Nesius, the various tekufos which happened throughout the Nesius, starting from the Tafshin Yuds.
As well. There's a bewusste Torah from the Baal Shem Tov on the Ma'ameh Chazal, Hakeda HaMegillah Mafreya Lo Yotza, which means if you read the Megillah backwards, you're not yetz to the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. That's the din. The Baal Shem Tov teaches that what does it mean Hakeda Megillah Mafreya? If you read it as if it's a story that happened in the past, the Mafreya, you're not Yetza. You have to live with it as it's happening now. The Rebbe in Tov Shalom Medvov, Purim, reconciled. And at the end of the day, the Baal Shem Tov Torah cannot contradict, and it has to also be consistent with the Pashta Pshat. And the Rebbe tied very simple but brilliantly that it means if you read it as if it happened in the past, then you're going to read it backwards. Because the last events are closest to our time, and the earlier events are farther back. So actually the Baal Shem Tov gives a Pirush Primi and a Rechkeit, because who's going to read a Megillah B'chlal backwards? But if you're going to read it backwards in the sense that it happened in the past, so then the events are all seen that way as well. I say it because at the same time there's also the Havamina. You know, the Mafreya, what we have the advantage when we look back in retrospect at the Rebbe's entire Nesius, you could understand and appreciate things that you would never understand while it was happening. Like we know, the Ness of Purim would not be appreciated at the time. It happened over a period of 7-9 years, and it seemed like random events. It's only now that we know after the fact what happened, then you see that all these events were all laid out in a very organized plan of Hashgacha Pratis, of a Nes Melubish B'Teva. Same thing with the Rebbe's Nesius. The Rebbe didn't announce to anyone exactly how he's going to lay out his whole strategy and plan. The Rebbe did what he did, but now when you look back, you appreciate and see beyond brilliant the whole strategy that the Rebbe laid out. So I just want to spell it out in context before we go into the specifics of this panel. And we learn, of course, the Rebbe always says, Nefron Odem Medaite Shalem Medaite, whatever the Rebbe said about the Frierdiker Rebbe also applies to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe, in a number of sichos, talks about the tkufas of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Nesius. Frierdiker Rebbe, as you see, it's literally 3 tkufas, 30 years, from Tafresh Pei to Tafshin Yud, and each period was its own stage. So you have the stage from Tafresh Pei, Tafshin Yud, till Tafresh Tzadik, the Rebbe says primarily in Russia, the Mesilas Nefesh in Russia, and Tafresh Tzadik till Tafshin, the Mesilas Nefesh in Poland, and all the challenges that the Frierdiker Rebbe faced there. And then the last 10 years was Tafshin till Tafshin Yud. You look, same thing, the Rebbe begins as Nesius Tafshin Yud, and when you look in retrospect, you see the Mafrei, you see also a pattern. So Yesh Emrim Chassidim say that the Rebbe, even though there's overlap, but you could say the first 10 years the Rebbe behaved more like an Av and a Ben to Chassidim. In the Chofs, in the 60s, it was more like a Rav and a Talmud. And the Lameds became more a Melech and a Am. And the Mems, there's Melech Yisrael and there's Melech HaKol HaElam, Melech HaKol HaAretz. That where the Rebbe focused on the entire world. And you really see it, you could see it Begashmis. When you look at the Sichos, you literally see how the Tkufas, how after Tafshin, the Rebbe begins establishing, of course, Tafshin Yud rather, the Nesius, the Mezdis, Tzach, the Shei B'nei Chabad, and the other different Mezdis, the basic establishment of the Mezdis Chabad. Even though the Rebbe spoke about Shlichus and the Rebbe focused on it and so on, but the real emphasis of Ufaratsta really began at the end of the Yuds, specifically Yud Beis Tammuz, Tafshin Chai. And then Tafshin Chof, you see clearly out of Rosh Hashanah how the Rebbe makes a whole tras, Masayim Shanim from the Baal Shem Tov, Ufaratsta. Now that Ufaratsta was not a theme before. But as I said, when you want to create some type of general focus, you see a whole new stage, and really Shlichus began to start, especially on the campuses, began to grow in the Chofs. Also minimal to what it would come later, but the emphasis on that. In the Lameds, you see the focus on Mifsoyim, and which of course brought the whole thing to another stage. I'm not going through all the details. I hope we'll go through them through the Fabrengens, but just in general. And in the Mems, it's very clear from Tafshin Mem and on, began the emphasis on Kol Elam Kulei, with the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach, with the different Numiftzayim of Sefer Teda for everybody, Tzivus Hashem. And it accelerated to the point where it came to the late Mems, Mashiach, which was, of course, the central message of all of the Rebbe Shlichus from Deir HaShvi, from the first Maimer, Bos Lagani, Tovshin Yud Aleph, 66 years ago, tonight or tomorrow, that the theme of Deir HaShvi all came together because the kavan of all these tkufis was one thing, was to bring the Geula. And you can look in the Sichos, you see Befedish, the acceleration and the emphasis of Geula, especially in the later Mems, all the way to Nun Beis. After Nun Beis is not the scope of this discussion here. So when you look at it that way, what you see is a few things. Number one, you see a pattern. Why do we need to have a pattern? What the Rebbe taught is good. So you don't need patterns and strategies. But nevertheless, it makes it far more geschmack and far more reich to see how the Rebbe literally had this strategy of conquering the Welt. But you can't conquer the Welt overnight. So when you look at the Sichos, you get the themes as the Rebbe develops them over the years. So I just wanted to put that into that type of context. You know, hopefully it's my honor to be together with the co-panelists here of different kufas. And then when you look at the details, of the actual sichos and farbrengens which we're going to discuss, and seeing them in the context that I just described, I think it gives a whole different pattern and appreciation of the entire picture of the Rebbe. And of course, we're at the stage where the Rebbe made it clear, which means all these tkufas that I just laid out. And now it's up to us, which of course is the matter of our whole being here, is to do something that we haven't done till now, to finally tip the scale and have the Rebbe back with us.
Rabbi Jacobson. As mentioned earlier, Rabbi Harlig was zeicha to be in the Rebbe's presence from the beginning of the Nesius, even before that, and on. We would like to ask Rabbi Harlig, being that we're right before Yud Shevat, to perhaps share with us his memories from that kufa of Tafshin Yud Aleph, especially by the farbrengen of Bosid Lagani, from when the Rebbe walked in.
Rabbi Person, thank you very much for inviting me. I just want to tell you something, what I don't think many people know, maybe not. Tafshin Lamed, there was the Sima Sefer Torah. Before that, it was a very cold week. Friday, it got warmer, and thousands of people came to 770 in and out, and that was the farbrengen, and the Rebbe went home, and when he came back from his house, he walked into the front door, and from all the people walking in and out, and the snow melted, there was a blotter. He walked his room, he turned around, and he said, Yola, Beichazei, is that Erev Shabbos? Mir doch zu Beichen Stub, zet nicht euch Erev Shabbos. By your house, it also looks like this Erev Shabbos? I don't think so. Guys took mops and this and cleaned up the place. Tafshin Yud was a year that people, from the beginning, people knew and wanted the Rebbe to become Rebbe and take over. There was many people who went to him and spoke to him and this to take over, but nothing prevailed. He said he's going to leave, he's going to go away, and then the Rebbetzin told him what's going to be. A thing what my grandfather and my father built up on all the years is going to go to waste. So that's, I think, when he decided and he was masking to go and take it upon himself, the Nesius. Then we see that from the beginning, all the years, all the things from Montreal went through the Rebbe, the yeshiva and Hollis and everything. So he called in once in the summer of Tafshin Yud, the Hollis from Montreal, and he asked them if you want to continue to go through me. There was then put up chairs in the Rebbe's room, and the people were sitting there. And then he said, I would like that one person takes upon himself to write once in 2 weeks or 3 weeks a duch of what's happening. So they were discussing between themselves. This guy said he can't, this guy said this, and this guy said that, and everybody had a different opinion. There was one person sitting in the back of the room, and he said, maybe I would do it, but I don't want people to see the title of what I'm going to write. It was before Tafshin Yud. So the Rebbe picked up his head, and he said, it's not important the title, it's not important, you could start with Shalom and Bracha. So the guy said to himself, if that's the case, and the Rebbe is a Yedei Machshavos, then I'm going to take it upon myself to write the, how do you call it, the duch once in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever the Rebbe wanted. When it came before Yud Shevat, it was very tense. People didn't know exactly what's going to be. And you should know that the Rebbe, the Maimah, the Batal Lagani Maimah, he kept in his siddur a whole year. And he davened upstairs, and Yud Shevat, he davened Ma'ariv, Shachas, and when he came back from the oil, he davened Mincha. But Ma'ariv, he came downstairs already to daven in the Zal. Then before the Verbringen, he called in the Holler from Montreal to come into him, and he spoke to them. Then he called, there was a Rabbi Yalis from Philadelphia to come in with him also. So he said, I would come in, but how am I going to get through to the Verbringen? There were so many people here and this. So the Rebbe told him, you'll hold on to my gartel and you'll be able to get in. The Rebbe came in from the side door in 770, from the Zal. And he walked in. There was a stage. The Frierdiker Rebbe verbring 2-3 times downstairs, and there was a stage there. And they wanted to put up the stage and a microphone. So the Rebbe said, I could speak loud, and anybody could see me also. There wasn't so many people, how many people could fit into the Zal in those days. So when he came into the Verbringen, Yalis was holding on to his gartel, and also he came in with the Maimah Batal Lagani. There was an old chassid, Nemtsov, and he said to the Rebbe, we want to hear Chassidus. So first he didn't answer him, and then Nemtsov got up, and he made Shechayonu, and the Rebbe answered Amen, and then later he opened up the Batal Lagani Maimah, and he said it chapter by chapter. He finished a chapter, he said further. He finished a chapter, he said further. Finished a chapter, and he said further the Maimah.
There was a niggin in between each chapter.
Right. And then it was very historical. I mean, we young Bachim, when were privileged to be by a Verbringen from the Frierdiker Rebbe. I came with my father. I was there twice by a Verbringen. But most of the people weren't even there. And a lot of the people who came weren't there before Tafshin Yud also.
So what was the reaction of the Chassidim after the Verbringen?
And after the Maimah and after this, they got up after the Verbringen and they were dancing for hours. Nemtsov, Rabbi Simpson, and other people were dancing for hours from joy in this, that we have a Rebbe that took over, and he is leading the Chassidim how it should be. And that's when he said, that's when he spoke about Mashiach and the Maimah that everybody knows, and he spoke about he said he doesn't want to write this is the first year from the Stalkers, because if there's a first year, there's a second year. So they said, I'm not going to write that, he said, by the Verbringen. And everybody was happy. That was on a Wednesday. Thursday morning, there was a big balagan. It wasn't set up. and the Rebbe came in to hear Kriyas HaTorah. And the shul was not set up. So everybody knows where the clock is in the Zal, and the Rebbe came in and he took a siddur and he sat under the clock. But he took the siddur and he folded it like this. So one of the people who used to live around Eastern Parkway, I think he lived, I don't remember where. Well, he didn't know who the Rebbe was. He went over, younger man. The Rebbe picked up his hat. Weißt aber halt nicht als siddur? So the Rebbe smiled. He opened up the siddur and he held it the right way.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Harlig.
And it's a pleasure, Rabbi. You should know he's a very choshev bocher. Rabbi Pearson. He's David Raskin's Sanenical, and in his own rights, he's a very choshev. Today he took over the yeshiva and Sach and everything. He replaced
Moving on to the
his
chafs.
grave.
We have here Rabbi Kaplan.
Oh, Rabbi Kaplan is good.
Usually, when one imagines a Fabringen at 770, he imagines the Fabringen taking place downstairs in the big shul. However, that wasn't always the case. The Fabringens weren't always in the shul. And Rabbi Kaplan, if you can elaborate on on what you remember from the Fabringens before it is what it is today, where it took place at the end.
A napkin, a tissue.
I want to start with something a little bit different for a moment.
Thank you.
We sit down now to listen to a Fabringen. And you can imagine, if you close your eyes and you have a good imagination, you can begin to see yourself. Imagine yourself actually standing, and the Rebbe is sitting in the front, etc., etc. When I was your age and younger than you, 14 and 15 years old, our Mashpiyim told us, was heißt mir geht rein zur Fabringen von Rebbe Glattersee? How did you just walk into a Fabringen and stand there and listen to the Rebbe? Where's your achone? How do you not prepare yourself? Es versteht sich, mikve so gerät. But how are we supposed to prepare ourselves? I remember one of our Mashpiyim saying, why do we stand with the Rebbe says a Maimer? Kol masha talmid vosik, osid lechadish, nemel lemeshe misinai. Who's the talmid vosik? So b'shas the Rebbe sagt a Maimer is b'shat chshina medaber is beter groine means this is something which mi'oz Moshe Rabbeinu and Klal Yisrael stood at Har Sinai. This Gilui Oyer never took place. It's a new Gilui Oyer of Torah. Wie stellt man sich weg? When it came to Matan Torah, you knew there had to be a chonah for 3 days. How do you just walk into a Fabringen? So our Mashpiyim demanded of us kids, think for a few minutes where you're going into, that the Rebbe is going to speak. Was for Agile meant, Agile Lekus. To put ourselves in a frame of mind that at least, if nothing else, we recognize that this was something which was Yetzim and Aklal, different, special. The Rebbe read. And in the course of a Fabringen, it wasn't just that we had to apply our mind. I mean, imagine sitting by Fabringen 6, 7, and 8 hours Simchas Torah, one night and another night. And it wasn't just a matter of listening carefully, applying your mind. There was an emotional tie as well. Here was a sikha about Russian Jews, and the Rebbe cried bitterly. Here the Rebbe demanded something, and you wanted to cry bitterly. And then the Rebbe danced. there was such a swing of emotions that took place by our Farbrengen, and we had to live through all this properly. Will durchnehmen. And then saying L'chaim to the Rebbe by Farbrengen. The Rebbe answered us sometimes. And each one of us knew when the Rebbe looked and didn't answer L'chaim, we knew why. We knew why the Rebbe isn't answering L'chaim. And sometimes, in the middle of a Farbrengen, things change. You try to say L'chaim again, and the Rebbe did answer. The things that went on by a Farbrengen, personal things. I can tell you one episode before we get into anything else. Just one episode to show you what it means. I was in Panal for many years, and one year is mir eingefallen. It doesn't make sense to start kids off learning Gemara from Nesius or Amafkid. It's hard. These kids are 11 years old. The concepts are difficult for them. Why don't we start something in Brochas? It's something they can relate to. Easier for them to understand. They can relate to it. They learn Shchonoch. They can become something. Was ich sagen, entscheidend mit der Metzia her und der Metzia dort. And I talked to a few Malamdim and I said, look, I want to do this, everybody. Folgt mir, lass mal gehen. One Malamid said, I don't know if it's a good idea. This is the way it's always been done. Yeah, good idea, not a good idea. We talked about it. Somebody snitched on me to Rabbi Meir Feinstein. The Panal, the Lepskach machen Sidorim azelche. So, through one of his sons, he said, this is the way Yidden did it for hundreds and hundreds of years. We teach a child not to be mazik, we teach a child about property, whatever. But mir sich nicht gelegt, okay, hat gesagt, There was a Farbrengen Shabbos, and in the middle, out of no place, the Rebbe says, und der Pfarrer hat mit Taki gelernt mit Kinder Dafke mit Nizikin. It doesn't appear in any Hanoche. It had kemat no shaykhs. I don't even know how it got in. But I felt a thunderbolt all of a sudden. The Rebbe hat mir geämpft auf a Shaila, without me even asking. That's one tiny thing by one person. You have to understand that when the Rebbe spoke, there were answers to people on a regular basis, heroes to individuals that nobody knew about, that nobody picked up on. A Farbrengen is nicht giving glad the Rebbe gerät an Indian Chassidus. When you talk about Ruach HaKodesh, we saw it openly begolui. That was the atmosphere of a Farbrengen. Es versteht sich, if you prepare yourself a little bit of achone, und man sitzt bei Farbrengen mit ein bisschen, steht bei Farbrengen, sitzt nicht, wenn Scheiches, stehen bei Farbrengen mit ein bisschen Kabbalah Seil, so, a bessere Kishrin, a winzigere Kishrin, we walked away with something that changed us. Azabisala. Cumulatively, it made Shtilach mention out of us. That's a general theme of a Farbrengen. Understand the Reka. I remember as a kid, nach ein Wort, Tovshin Yud Ches, Tovshin Chai, Sukkis. The Shalash, as you all know, stood where the first part of the shul is today. And there was a little roof that covered the area that used to be the garages. The schach of the sukkah, the poles that had the beams that held the schach, were over the little roof. So you had a little roof slanting for about 3 or 4 feet into a sukkah. The schach started after the little roof. So a bunch of kids decided, this was Simchas Torah, in order to get close to the Rebbe, let's lay down on the roof. Oh, good idea. We'll be close instead of standing in the back. So we lay down on the roof, Our feet were higher than our heads, slanting toward the shalash. And then one fellow, decided, we have to say l'chaim. And obviously the Rebbe looked up and he sees on the roof, there's this whole slew of kids, maybe 15 kids. How many kids were in Lubavitch then? 15, 20 kids? A whole slew of heads over there. And the Rebbe said like this, Zog l'chaim, Zog l'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. And he went through every one of the kids. The Rebbe paid attention to every individual kid. That's Bo B'Shor, that the Fabringis were hours and hours. Look at the Sichas of Simchas Torah Tov Shin Chai. So how could you not become Nishtane etwas was? Wird man sich nicht aufgeheben? The first mimer that Rabbi Yael Khan made us chazer was a mimer Balayla Ahu Tov Shin Chof. A meredike mimer. Nur kids. You heard the mimer, you had a bissl mehr, verstanden vom mimer. Kids. I learned the mimer at least 10 times. I mean, ad hayem, if I learn the mimer, it goes like me, it's Girse de Yankese. And it, as a kid then, all of a sudden it dawned on me, da tut sich ob greise Sachen. It's not just a matter of listening to sichas. You say this in Chassidus, we have to pick these things up. And everything changed from them. We used to listen to Chazorah Rabbi Yael in Bedford Avenue Sunday night. And we used to sit and write the sichas. I look at some of the things that I wrote when I was 14, 15 years old. When I learned a bissl lisbo. A Kind hat sich zugetragen, sag. We tried, but it was gearbeitet auf them. So it wasn't just a matter of going into a Fabringen. Versteht ihr das? In the course of the Chofs, there were many special occasions also, which we'll talk about later on. I remember Yud Kislev, Tov Chov Beis. The Rebbe spoke that the Michel Rebbe vergisst in Chassidus, sometimes 3 Maimorim in one Fabringen. And the Rebbe said 3 Maimorim in that Fabringen. The first Maimor is printed already. Printed side from the Michel Rebbe and Simon the Rebbe Sagoes. Can you imagine having to hear 3 Maimorim and to be koilet 3 Maimorim? Imagine what it does to everybody. The Rebbe gist Chassidus. It's a gissach. Starting in the Chofs, Chof Aleph really, Lag Beima Tov Shin Chof, they started to build a new shul. The shalash came down on Lag Beima, and the little roof I talked about, after the parade, I remember coming back to 770, because what did we have to do, B'chlal kids then? You went to Yeshiva, after you came off from Yeshiva, whatever you had to do, and then you came back to 770 to check the place out again. And there given a chasana, so we came to the chuppah. And here was something else, and here we hung around with the bochrim. This was, the whole life evolved around, was going on in 770. I came back after the parade, after the park, I came back to 770, there's no roof. They're starting to hit and try to knock down the porch that went up to the door that led to the Rebbe's room. The beginning of the construction of the new shul. And I remember his grandfather, Rabbi Kadosnovsky, standing there and saying, he led the construction effort. So now there's no shalash. So the Fabringins in Tov Shin Chof were either in a hall or Shabbos Mevorchim, they were in shul upstairs. And something funny happened over there. I remember at Tov Shin Zayin, for example, when we first came from England. So the back of the shul was still not so packed by a Fabringen. But by the time Tov Shin Chof came around, the kids used to stand all the way in the back on a bench. We couldn't stand there anymore. Sivat Sares, there are Bochum all around there in Gelait. Things were starting to move and to grow. I remember one kid turned around and the walls were sweating. and he started to draw something on the wall. And somebody said, Shabbos! Chil Shabbos! The walls were sweating. That's the way it was, if I bring in upstairs. And then we came to the Fabringen for the first time. Du gedenkst kalte schmutzig, Meir?
Yeah. He was so upset.
The Rebbe was so upset then.
Noch a solcher Geluyen von...
Our ganzen Tishrei, they wanted to go and Fabringen downstairs.
He came down to Tillen.
Yeah. And Rabbi Yechon and Gordon says, mir geht darauf erfunden, es ist kalt und es ist schmutzig.
Uns nicht doch allein.
Uns nicht, ja, nicht lichtig.
Can you translate
And by the
this?
Fabrik, you're going downstairs to the shalash, and it's what date was it? Shabbos Bereshis Tovshin Chai. It's cold and it's dirty. Shabbos Bereshis after Simchas Torah. You know, you can imagine what it looked like after the whole Simchas Torah scene, yeah? And they didn't clean up right away, mamish. Everybody should come to make sure it was actually, absolutely spick and span. Nicht geschehen solche Sachen. Rabbi Yechon says, mit Verbringen da, weil unten ist kalt und schmutzig, it's dirty and it's cold. And by the Verbringen, the Rebbe cried. A whole Tishrei goes, mit alle Geluyim, was sie gewähnt von Tishrei. And Shabbos Bereshit, it's still cold and dirty. The Rebbe cried. And this was something even the kids, we felt, as Amisot. The Rebbe weint, was sie kalt und schmutzig. We're talking about kalt und schmutzig, and meine Neshama is kalt und schmutzig, That was the kind of thing we lived through. Tov Shin Chof Aleph was different already. There's a shul. We could go downstairs. The bima appeared later on and after the first couple of weeks. A little bit of rachves. And there was an announcement, I remember Rabbi Yechon also made. Me geht up in the Greisen Naya Shul. And I heard somebody saying that the Rebbe said, "Nu, na yek in Greise das nicht." It didn't take a few months, and the new big shul that we had was also packed to the gills. We had no place to stand anymore.
When was the last Verbringen upstairs?
Yud Beis Sivan Tov Shin Chof Aleph was the last Verbringen. Tov Shin Chof was the last Verbringen upstairs. Tov Shin Chof. I remember the Verbringen.
He came back from the oil.
Came back from the oil. Yeah. Yeah. Yud Beis Sivan it was. The Woche Verbringen, yeah. The Chovas Hadas now, but it didn't take very long before it was packed downstairs too. Completely packed. And the Verbringers of the Chovs, I lived through already as somebody who was standing there listening to the Sichos and so forth and so on. Mekirat Chazor einmal, Chazor a zweitmal, a drittmal. Eppes sof kol sof geht rein in Kopf. So I look at the Sichos today of the Chovs, and nicht gefremde Sachen, I look at our Maimos, nicht gefremde Sachen. Weil man das durchgearbeitet. It wasn't shaykh to come to a Fabringen and listen and go home and forget about the Fabringen. So most of us stayed Chazorah, that's the first thing. And then Motzei Shabbos, there was Chazorah again. Rabbi El Fabring had Chazorah upstairs. And in Bedford Avenue, Sunday was a new Chazorah. Sof kol sof, after a couple of times Chazorah, you familiarize yourself with the Sichos, mit gelebt mit the Sichos. The Rebbe is gemonta Zach, mit gelebt mit them. A whole week, as kids even. A whole week, mit gered the Rebbe, gesagt, das zu jenem zu das. Das sie given the ganze Zugang zu them. And in the Chof, so the Rebbe gemont starke Sachen, on a different level, on the Foratsto, Shlichus, and so forth and so on. Jugendlight began to go on Shlichus then. The first guys, I remember the first ones leaving. Mendel was still in when? Chof, Mendel left, yeah? Chof, yeah. He got married. Hey, Tammuz Yud Ches, he began the Chuppet, let's have Beisai. I snuck out of yeshiva to go to the Chuppet, don't tell me stories. Yutesi left. So in the Chofs already, it says Berel Shem Tov, the first one started to go and Shlichus, sie haben sich gekocht sich an dem. Der ist gefahren da, der ist gefahren dorten. Ichke Springer hat never ever unpacked his suitcase. He was waiting to be told after the Chasana, he was waiting to be told where he has to go on Shlichus. So we kids knew that Ichke Springer is waiting to be told that he has to go to Baltimore on Shlichus. The Indian is he never unpacked his suitcase after the Chasana because he knew he had to leave. Das ist nicht doch Meises. We're not staying here. You have to leave right away to go on Shlichus. Mir haben sich gekocht in them. That was what we talked about as kids. That's the early chofs. Okay, we'll talk about the later chofs a little bit later. I want to monopolize.
Right, thank you very much, Rabbi Kaplan. Just to make a short announcement, there will be a bus at 6:45 going to the oil, and at 8:30 there'll be a video of Yud Shevat Tafshel Lamed Hey. Will be by the oil in the fourth tent. Whoever would like to reserve a seat, please text 347-770-4274. Again, 347. And this number as well is for all those who have questions that would like to be addressed here. Should also text this number, 347-770-4274.
That's how they used to reserve seats by the Fabringen, by Rebbe. They used to text, I think, to reserve a seat like that.
Just to tell you how it was then to Fabringen, if you came at 8 o'clock in the morning, you stood in the back already. Bochum knew everywhere, but by 7 o'clock you had a chapa place already. 7:30, we all knew which places. Mit gechapt, der erste auf der Kestel, der zweite, der dritte, der vierte. You know, there weren't that many places, and you had to come early in the morning every single Shabbos. Shabbos Bochum, Tillim is 8:30, but if you went there 7:30, you're in trouble. You may have to stand someplace in the bleachers.
Just going on to the Lamids, Rabbi, we have here Rabbi Zeligson. In the Lamids, just from the beginning already, if I'm not mistaken, it was Purim, or Yud Shevat actually, when the Rebbe first spoke about Tkufa of Shleimus Haaretz. All those who were there obviously remember the Rebbe screaming about the horrible deal of giving away land as being the emistika Reya Neman of the Yidden. When someone brought tzaras to Yidden, obviously it caused tremendous pain by the Rebbe until the core. So if you can please share with us some of that, some of your chreines from that tkufa. As well as Purim, when the Rebbe started speaking about Mi Yehudi.
Okay, the Benegiat Shleimus Haaretz, it actually started Behemshech to the 6-Day War. After the 6-Day War, which is this year 50 years, the Rebbe found out that the government, Israeli government, was sending delegations to Washington. They're ready to give up the Mekemes Hakdeshim, everything for the magic word called peace. And Meir, they were ready b'chashoy to do everything. They wrote up things, and the Rebbe Lechatchila tried privately, in a confidential way, dealing with the different connections, contacts that the Rebbe had in the government. And when the Rebbe saw that it's not working, the Rebbe went public, and the Rebbe then started to speak about it. Barabim in Tavshin Chavtes, in Tavshin Lamed, the Rebbe is speaking about Chevron. The Rebbe is speaking about that there is Nachala there, that Lubavitch has Nachala there, and it was confiscated. And it was Pashat with Agmas Nefesh. But generally, whenever there was a sharp Sikha, the Rebbe would Pashat in the middle, out of nowhere, would Pashat connect it with a Pirush Rashi, or the Razeyar, or the Razey Metamol, would scream sometimes for 10-15 minutes, if not longer. And this was something, it was something very painful. It was something that most of these siches, a lot of these siches, akoponim, were not included in the siches, in the Fabrengen itself. Some are published in the Sofis of the Siches Kedesh, and some are lachatchila only anocha pratis, individual people wrote. In addition to that, on top of that, came the issue of Mir Yehudi, which the Rebbe began speaking about at Purim Tovshin Lamed, 47 years ago. He started from then, and the Rebbe continued non-stop, literally non-stop, every public appearance. Whenever the Rebbe spoke in public, the Rebbe spoke about the Mir Yehudi, 15 minutes, 20 minutes on Meir. It was made a dikpasha, the Agmas Nefesh, and everything. There were times that the Rebbe said, one time the Rebbe said that it should be mentioned in every simcha. A person should get up and object to the union of Mir Yehudi, which is basically called the law of return. It's a law that in Israel, the Rebbe says, the so-called law, that they identified that who is a Jew doesn't have to say halacha on the certificate. And the Rebbe mentioned different things that were coming up over the weeks, months. There were things that the Rebbe spoke about what was going on in the government. And the Rebbe says they're not denying what I said. The Rebbe said, but they want to know who told me about it. There was one time the Rebbe said a lashon, which is not in the siches, not in the printed siches. The Rebbe said that one time they threatened the Rebbe that if he's going to speak about me, a Yehudi, so they're going to write up in the newspapers. So the Rebbe said, in spite, the Rebbe said, I spoke to her twice as long. It was it was Pasha, the Rebbe was speaking, and then it was in Israeli newspapers. There were times the Rebbe edited it. Today it's in Lukut Siches Chaf Aleph and Deis Office. When the Rebbe began speaking about it, Purim, Tavshin Lamed. It went on, as mentioned, every Shabbos Fabringen, Wunara Gelegenheit, wherever there was occasion. In addition to that, there were times that people, Bacharim, outside of 770, listening to what was going on in Yechidus, they would hear the Rebbe screaming at people that are connected with the government, why they're not acting, why they're not correcting it. It was something which was mamish from Milchames Hashem. This was one of the intense ones that the Rebbe always spoke about. It did not leave an occasion not to mention it. And then it went on also occasionally in the later years.
So that was the beginning of the Tafshin Lamids. In the mid-Tafshin Lamids, mid-1970s, that's when the big Sturm of Hafotza really took off. If you can please share with us regarding the tanks and in general, all the Mitzrayim really took off in those 2 years of Lamed Dalet and Tafshin Lamed Dalet and Tafshin Lamed Hey.
Winter Tafshin Lamed Dalet was right after the war from Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael, and the Rebbe started to speak Heroes, Yud Kislev, Yud Shevat, Heroes, Nu Mivtzoyim. The Rebbe didn't refer to it as a Mivtza then. The Rebbe said we should see to it every Jewish house should have mezuzahs, every Jewish house should have Hebrew Svarim, Pashit Svarim, every Jewish house should have a Tzedakah Pushka. And actually the Rebbe was establishing Nu Mivtzoyim. And towards the end of that year, we had already 5 Mivtzoyim.
How often would a Mivtza come out?
It was random. I mean, it was actually in that winter, in a short time, I think between Yud Kislev and Yud Shevat, it was accumulated about 5 Mivtzoyim, together with the Mivtzat film for 7 years earlier, from the 6-Day War. So the Rebbe spoke about it. It was the story in Malot, that Rahman al-Itzlan, it was then that there was a tragedy then that they hijacked, they had kids and hostages from a school, and Rahman al-Itzlan, there were karbonis then, 17 students, and the Rebbe spoke about it the Shabbos after. That was the first thing the Rebbe says. Usually we speak about it later in Fabrengen. The Rebbe says, but since something very unusual happened, the Rebbe spoke in the beginning. And the Rebbe says that now he sees what it pushed him, what urged him to speak about Mivtza Mezuzah. The Rebbe was speaking about it months earlier, about Mivtza Mezuzah. B'chol Leifen, the Rebbe was speaking about the Mivtzoyim, and finally, amongst them, Rav Sholem Duchman, they decided we have to rent trucks, Hertz trucks. We rented the trucks, and we started to push it. Okay, I'll call upon him. It was then that the Rebbe, that we started to rent. They rented trucks, the Hertz trucks, put on signs, and we waited for the Rebbe at 10 o'clock in the morning. When the Rebbe came, that's when we were ready to go. It was a big chiddush. Everybody was after davening, mit alle inyanim, and it was pashit mizgefahren. It was, the music was blaring, and the Rebbe motioned with his hands. And if a tank wasn't ready, we turned around on Union Street. We silenced the music. We had to fix up a few things you had to fill in, and then we left. We used to come back about 9 o'clock at night till the shkia. We put on film with people. I think somebody even wrote into the Rebbe, if we go according to the regular shkia, then we can nechet mitzvah zayin rabbein tam shkia. So the Rebbe said the regular shkia. And there were heroes. There was one hero that Rabbi Chodikov gave over, that we should not just have conversations with people if it's not getting anywhere, because they're just trying to occupy our time, that we shouldn't be able to get to others. This went on a day after a day. Pashit Nochanant, full days. It was like a 10-hour thing. Summer was starting. And the Rebbe, actually there was a Fabrengen that the Rebbe said that the Fabrengen is exclusively the covered the Bacharim and Anash that are involved in the Mivtzoyim. The Rebbe sagt, they must fadin, they earned it. It was Parsha Kerach. And then through the summer, the Rebbe started to speak about the Rosh Tevis of Tank, Rosh Tevis, the Inyan of Mivtza, the word Mivtza. Kama in Yonim, we were supposed to say to many in Yonim that summer, when you get to this Inyan. There were 5 Mivtzoyim then. We went out on Mivtzoyim. There were people that went out. We went out sometimes to a city out of town for a week. And the Rebbe sent down then $5 bills, a $5 bill to everyone that went. It was the 5 Mivtzoyim. The Rebbe connected it with the Pirtzufim and Atzilos. I'll give an Inyan of Mispar 5. And it was after a while that one of the Maskirim told us that the Rebbe asked who's taking the Achrayas for the Bittul Teira all these days. I mean, the yeshiva was like closed, literally. The light was on, but everybody was bachutz. The Rebbe says, I'm not taking the Achrayas for it. It's a bislach, it's solidified, and it's settled in that the Zmanim for Mivtzoyim were set up. Alabatim used to go Sundays, and then the Mivtzoyim was set up for Friday. And the Rebbe says there's enough time Friday after Seder HaYeshiva that they can use for that. Basically, the Rebbe then also, at that occasion, one of the occasions, the Rebbe said that the Mivtzoyim are tanks against assimilation. And it was also at one occasion that there was a certain drawing, which the Rebbe was very interested in it, stopped and was studying it for a while. It was, today you don't see it come out. It was like green on white. It was a tank in the form, film, like the Nesius of film from both sides, and a tank like bias, and the Rebbe studied it for quite a while, and that was interest to the Rebbe. There was one time I can tell a personal experience. We were once coming back from Queens. We went there to a baseball game or something, and we come back. It's getting dark. We see a silver car at our side. The Rebbe is coming back from the Eil. We put on the music. The Rebbe was sitting in the front seat usually. The Rebbe looked up, didn't say anything, then continued right to reading. We tried saying Minor Lashon. We tried to keep up. For a while, we weren't able to keep up, went very fast. But then on Eastern Parkway in Buffalo, we were able to catch up. Behind the Rebbe, till 770, Michel above. The Rebbe came out. The Rebbe came out of the car. He motioned to the tank, the union of encouraging the Simcha, the Chulu. This was based. Others also had experiences. There's one experience that I heard by Mechutin actually, that somebody once met the Rebbetzin in Manhattan. Asked her if she lights candles every Friday. She didn't. They didn't know it was the Rebbetzin. So the Rebbetzin asked, "Why should we light candles?" Sagen Sie, der Lubavitcher Rebbe hat sie gesagt. Lubavitcher Rebbe said so. So she asked, "You do everything the Lubavitcher Rebbe tells you?" But then she saw that there was somebody recognizing her. Actually, Mechutin was the older bacher. He was recognizing. So she immediately said, "Kinderlach, I light Shabbos candles every Friday." And then she just went weiter. Person shouldn't be able to.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Zeligson. Moving on to Tafshin Lamed Zayin, Rabbi Jacobson. If you can please share with us what do you remember from the Verbringen of Yud Kislev Tafshin Lamed Zayin.
Since everyone's going off script, I'll also go off script, if you don't mind. I don't want to. And also, we like to have truth in advertising. Since it was also advertising, I think everyone said what everyone said here is beautiful stuff, and the Hageshim, very moving. But I think I'm personally also curious, just to go back. You're up to Lamed Zayin already, but the Yuds and the Chovs, maybe we could just go over some facts that everyone would, I'm sure, appreciate. I could pose the questions or respond in the ways that I remember, and hopefully the elder, senior, and veteran panelists here can fill in gaps. And Rabbi Feller, who has a prodigious memory and has absorbed so much, can also help along here. I'm just curious to know, the Fabrengens, when did they begin 1:30, K'be'efin Kavua, Shabbos, 1:30?
It was Tafshin Yud Zayin. There was a guy here from Israel, and he moved here, and he had a boy in the breast for Shabbos. So he told the Rebbe, if the Rebbe used to come out half an hour after the Fabrengen, What?
After davening.
After davening, he used to come out, and he said nobody will come to the bris. So the Rebbe said, okay, we'll change it to 1:30. So everybody will come
What
to the
Shabbos?
bris.
Do you know what Shabbos? Exact Shabbos?
Yeah.
Yud Zayin.
Yeah.
And then from then on,
It
1:30.
was- Yeah.
And how long was an average Fabring in those years? Was there an average?
2 hours, 3 hours.
3:30, 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Not later than 4.
No.
What
Later
about-
years it became.
Yeah. I'll get those. I remember. I want to know those. I don't remember. What about the big Fabringens, the weekday Fabringens, like the Taskisa, the Tammuz? Some of them went pretty late, right?
Yeah, Purim went pretty late.
What was the longest Fabring you remember?
I think it was Purim.
Purim Tav Shin Chai.
Yeah.
Is that 5th?
No, after 5 o'clock.
What time?
I was a kid still before Bar Mitzvah.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go home. The Rebbe Nechal's do.
Right.
At 5:45, I was standing at the car when the Rebbe moved in, sat down, and I was on the other side of the car, so the Rebbe moved toward me. 5:45.
Rabbi Harlig, how often were
From
Fabringen
9:30. From 9:30 in the evening.
How often were Fabringen held in halls?
How often would the whole for Yud Kislev, Yud Shevat, and
Purim bis Tammuz.
Purim and Yud Beis Tammuz till Tavshin Chav.
I think someone made it a shima. You know how many?
Yes.
Where were the halls located? In the area, or?
There was one on Eastern Parkway and Nostrand, the Gayard. There was one in Flatbush, the Biltmore. There was one on Albany and someplace.
Rutland Road.
Rutland Road.
There's a reason there were so many, because once a Fabringen ended, nobody ever wanted to rent the hall again.
Kislev Tav Shin.
Yudalit.
Yudalit, whatever.
and Albany Terrace.
Albany Terrace.
Yeah,
There was
that's what
Fabringen, was mit Tanzstock, and there was a liquor store underneath.
All the bottles.
Imagine what happened to the bottles.
But
Wouldn't let them in again.
I'll share a story. Yutas Kisel Yudalit. There's actually a picture where you see the Rebbe dancing. It was a hall. There's a lot of mirrors there. There were no mirrors left after the Fabringen. But 1 o'clock in the morning of the Fabringen was going on and on. 1 o'clock, Zalman Gerari wrote to the Rebbe a note between the Sikhs that we rented it till 1 o'clock, and after that's going to be overtime. And the Rebbe didn't even look at it. He put it into his siddur. 2 o'clock, he sent it settle again. I mean, he wasn't doing it Mitzat Chutzpah. He was doing it Poshet to the Rebbe should know. Nesius. And 2 o'clock, another settle. The Rebbe also put it in. 3 o'clock, another settle. And this time the Rebbe took it and tore it. So obviously he didn't write any more settle. I don't know what time the Fabringen ended, but that was a thing I heard. So what about the Memoriam the Rebbe said Shabbos morning? What was the Rebbe said that?
I was there by the first one, Meir Chabderuis.
What was that?
They canceled.
Tes Oda Sheni Tov Shin Chai. There were maybe 15 people.
Shabbos.
Yeah.
There were maybe 15 people and 2 kids. One was Nuchem Kaplan, the other one was Shalom Yisrael Chadakov.
The Rebbe said to close the
The
door.
Rebbe came in, told him to close the door. Rabbi Mentik was there and he closed the door.
No one had a clue.
That was what people came. They're looking. They came to the store. The Nacht began with Klap Mintir. Somebody apparently.
What time was the Maimer?
The Maimer was 9 o'clock in the morning. It's supposed to be a full Zal of Bachim.
Okay.
That was what it was.
And how many were there? How long did it? To when did it?
It stopped when it was Yud Shevat was Tavshin Chav Beis. The Rebbe came in and there was a minyan for Kriya. And the Rebbe said, Sitzayna Maima. So everybody dropped the Sefer Torah. I mean, not dropped it, they left and they went into the room. And the Rebbe said, was mit dem Sefer Torah? Was mit the Kriya? Nobody answered. Was mit the Kriya? Nobody answered. So he closed his chumash. He said he can't tell again, and said Nizanka Maima. And that was the last time.
Okay, so hope you don't mind. Just
I actually have those questions. But,
okay, just filling in the gap.
I was going to go back to the...
I have more experience in emceeing than you do. So with that said, what about the Rebbe gave out Chanukah Geld also, the early Chavs, right?
He gave out Chanukah Geld from Tavshin Yud Gimel.
Yud Gimel, every Chanukah. When did he stop?
He stopped Chav Beis. He stopped because somebody was here from Israel, and he went for Yitzhak Kislev, and he went into the Rebbe, and he told him he's here a few weeks or whatever, and he sees that Melantnish, Visidavtes and Chassidus. So the Rebbe said no more Chanukah Geld. He said that he just sent Chanukah Geld that year to Montreal. But like this, he used to come in the 5th of Lichtel. There used to be a beamer set up.
Simchas Torah Lamed Beis, the Rebbe listed all the things that he stopped.
Yeah, then he came in with a sack of dollars, and he sat down, he said a sicha, then everybody walked around, and they got $1. And there was one guy, he told him, Adain Chanukah Geld liegt in Eretz Yisrael, because he wanted him to go back, and he didn't go back.
Okay, so to fill in a few more gaps, you also probably all know 3 times the Rebbe went to camp, and said sichas there, Tazayin, Yuzayin, and Tavshin Chof.
Yeah.
And of course, there was the unique things then was as well the nigunim the Rebbe taught from Tavshin Tez Zayin Biz Tavshin Chov Dalet. That was after Hakofis.
That was after eating when he used to come down, and he gave out mashka. He was some Nevna Sofer in Lanach Sidis.
Tezvov through Chov Dalet. Chov Dalet, the Rebbe said, next year we don't know what's going to be, so I'll teach 2 nigunim. And then the next year was Chov Hey, was of course the Stalkus of the Rebbe Tzanchana. And then the Rebbe began the Sichas of Rashi Sichas. I'm just filling in some gaps based on...
We're going to go back to the...
You will? Okay. The Rashi Sichas. But the Rebbe every... Chov Hey was a Fabringen every Shabbos, short Fabringens. And, but how did the Rebbe... What caused the Rebbe to continue the Rashis? It was like he was going to be Mafsik, right? And it was Waldman? Was it?
Yeah. Waldman used to write in.
He used to write and ask for the Maramachim.
There's also a letter from Rabbi Weinberg where he asked the Rebbe to Shus to Chazer the Rashi Sicha on the radio because he was giving a shir, the shir b'Sefer Tanya, every Motzei Shabbos was for, I believe, a half hour. He said he wanted to spend maybe half the time to Chazer the Fabrengen, and especially the Rashi, the new style of learning that the Rebbe introduced. And the Rebbe said, I believe the answer is, it's printed, but in came Chazik Svarasi Leisvadus. That was already in the beginning of Tavshin Chav Hey, that he would continue it every week. So that was even before that kufa.
I think the Rebbe wanted to continue Fabringen every Shabbos Chavov, but he said there are too many times.
Ich habe gemeint, der Rebbe said, man versteht doch Jiddisch. Ich habe gemeint, dass es eine gewaltige Sache, man verbringt alle Shabbos, aber ich habe nicht gewusst, als wir haben mal sehr viel Snackdes, aber man schreibt mir, aber man kann nicht essen in der Heim und das und jens, hat man zuziehen bis zum Sof-Jahr.
This was Tavshin Chav Hey?
Yeah.
Every week there was a Fabringen in Tavshin Chav Hey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he wanted to continue like this the whole time. People wrote in.
My first memory of a Fabringen, just for the record, is the Chav Hey, actually, Shabbos Vov Tishrei. Maybe earlier, but that one I remember very well, the Fabringen, where Rabbi Unik ran over to the Rebbe in the middle of Fabringen.
Dr. Zeligson came over to us.
Zeligson came.
So we were the kids, used to be, the shul was then the small shul. That was built as Rabbi Kaplan described. So the kids were in the back of the shul, they were the bookcases, we would sit in those bookcases there.
Rabbi Jacobson, can you describe where the shalash was?
Shalash is basically the shul, the big shul, the first third, the first section.
Not even the third, less than a third.
Less than a third. What a shalash means. Well, when 770 was bought, there's even pictures of the Rebbe. You see the picture. 770 was only the original 770 that we see. The Rebbe's room was actually the last part of the building. The back of the Rebbe's room was a porch.
Yeah.
Rabbi Kaplan mentioned. You see there's actually, first like Beima Parade, the Rebbe stands on the porch speaking, and you see the kids down below. Down below, that's where the shalash. It was an open, like
Big
basically.
It was a
It was a
garage.
driveway for a garage, a three-car garage.
A 5-car garage.
Three.
3 cars.
All right, but there was room for another 2.
It depends who fit into the cars. That's what
We got the pictures.
Yeah. Upon that was the shalash. So in the summer, it was less problem because it wasn't very cold. So it could be Fabringens there when the Fabringens began. I mean, when did the first Fabringen begin? Wasn't the shalash? That's a good question. What was the first Fabringen and shalash? Not upstairs in the shul.
I think in the Yuds, yes.
Obviously.
In the Yuds.
Yeah.
In the early years.
Can we get
I think
little more?
Tezvov. I think Tezvov.
when the Elam became too large, all Esther was an expansion. So the Farbrengens were in the shul upstairs. In the Zal, what was called the Zal, with the Rebbe David Mincha, that was everything was upstairs. And Friedrich Rebbe, I think, also has had two, you mentioned two Farbrengens, I think, were in that room. Then, when they expanded, so in the summer was not a big issue because the shalash, as I said, the worst thing could be rain. So they put up these tarps, whatever they put up originally. Then, in the winter, however, you couldn't Farbrengen, it was too cold. That's when they started renting the halls. That's why the halls were only winter Farbrengens, not summer ones. The shalash, as you said, they've already mentioned that when the shalash was Tafshin Chof Aleph was the last Chofez. The last Farbrengen. Chof Aleph. Al Kaplan, then the shul was built, and that shul stood till Chof Ches, which means not a third, the first section, till the first beams. When you walk into 770, down the ramp now, that area, till the first beam was the shul. That I remember, it was till Chof Ches. And Chof Ches, they began to expand, 770 was expanded twice. Expand once, went approximately around another half away, a little more. And then, that was in the Chof Ches, when they broke the wall, that Tishrei, you could actually see people stood on the wall. There was so much dust. It was such a churban.
Broke the wall. Erev Simchas Torah.
Yeah.
At night.
Yeah.
What year was that they broke the wall?
Tafshin Chof Ches.
Yeah.
We broke the wall with tolls and with benches because
There was a separate
We had
time when
professional
they did that in
contractors.
Tafshin
You
Lamed
understand?
Dalet
Both
also.
of them, like,
In end of Elul Lamed Gimel, they also did
went to
something
Kingston.
similar. That was when the last.
Yeah, so the Elul Lamed Gimel was the last, and that's when the white wall that we see today was put up, with all the controversy around that.
Agav, Simon mentioned about the dust, the bricks, everything. The Bacharim was standing then in Rosh Hashanah in front of the Rebbe. There was like the wall, a halbe wand. The Rebbe pointed out that they shouldn't fall Kedem there because all the stones, everything that's laying there.
Right. And,
Now, I just want to point out for a moment that the largest Farbrengen that there ever was, when it literally was wall to wall, was Yud Shevat Tafshin Mem.
Right, I
When it
was
was Shloshim Shana, that was the largest attendance ever. That literally went till the white wall. There was seats, there was benches, till the bleachers went up to
even
the
later, Farbrengens and Memches.
There was never anything as big as
Really?
Yud Shevat Tafshin Mem.
Okay.
Maybe Simchas Torah, the crowd might have been different, but in terms of a Farbrengen itself, per se, that was the largest Farbrengen ever.
Okay, so to fill in a few more gaps, then I'll go to Lamed Zayin. So 770 expanded, of course, the Farbrengens expanded. I will tell you, I remember Farbrengen, it was the Shabbos after Chofov. Shabbos Pasha Ekev Tovshin Lamed Zayin. It's a famous Farbrengen. So what happened was that Rabbi Groner asked the Rebbe out of Shabbos, instead of asking the Rebbe, it's Zayin Farbrengen, he asked him, Kefon in country. It's Yache Kala also. So the Rebbe said, fortgesund, the Rebbe said by the Farbrengen. But as Gocha Prod is mir nicht gefragt zu seiner Farbrengen, mir gefragt mir so von. Aber gleich reingehabt, Edem ist trachten was, ne? Fortgesund der So he went and Rabbi went, and the Farbrengen then was like the original Farbrengens, maybe a few hundred people, not even. All the way, so I mean, it was a big simcha by us because we were able to recreate a Farbrengen from the Yuds or the Chofs, whatever. So the Rebbe sat much closer.
It was also dripping from the top. Up in the
That I
Rebbe
don't remember.
upgerucht all the way to the bleachers. And the Rebbe figured that there's no...
But someone has a record of all the drippings in 770.
No,
Every
this
time
was...
there
This
a
was
leak.
Rabbi
this was an
Jacobson,
exception.
let's actually move on to the Mitzvah Shabbos Farbrengens and Tafshin Lamed Ches. So we know after the Rebbe's heart attack and Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres Tafshin Lamed Ches, there were no Farbrengens for an entire Lamed Ches, Lamed Tes, and no Shabbos Dike Farbrengens.
There were a few,
Although there
a
was
few
Yom
exceptions.
Tif Farbrengen, there was exceptions. Yom Tif there was, and a few exceptions.
Well, okay, so I'm getting there, right there. I want to add one more thing before we get to that. Before you mentioned the Mitzvahim, it's a very, I think, critical point to mention. Many of the major pulas of the Rebbe began in connection to events that happened at Yisrael. Mitzvah Tefillin was mentioned in connection to Chov Zayin, Shavuos, and then the subsequent months, the Rebbe Sichas, that summer, the Rebbe Farbrengen almost every Shabbos as well. It was all about the 6-day war and the Nisim. And the Rebbe then said that Tishrei Chav Ches V'Hoy Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol 3 times. It was a very unbelievable tkufa. And then Mitzvah Simchas Torah, and then Yiteskisa, the Rebbe spoke about as it felt over the Lashtachvis al Har Kochi. So that was one. Of course, after Lamed Daled, the Yom Kippur Milchama was the 5 Mivtzayim that Rabbi Zeligson mentioned, which then turned into the 3 Mivtzayim in the summer of Lamed Daled for the Noshim, Neshek and Tars Mishpacha, Kashrus, and then Mitzvah Shabbos Bereshis Lamed Hey, the Rebbe had a special Fabrengen for women. That was once in history, and that's when the Rebbe launched Neshek and reinforced it. That was Mitzvah Shabbos Lamed Hey Bereshis. So to move on, Lamed Ches, of course, was the heart attack, Simchas Teda, Leil Shmini Atzeres actually, and what happened after that was, without going into all the details of that parsha, there was obviously no Fabrengen before Akofis, even though that was a shock to everyone, because it was the first time the Rebbe's schedule was somewhat shifted. It was like fathomable to imagine the Rebbe changing anything. But then the Rebbe spoke, of course, that very moving sikha right after Yom Tov. And the Rebbe spoke from the microphone in his room. It's recorded. The Rebbe said, and after that, the Rebbe began Mitzvah Shabbos Bereshis, Mitzvah Shabbos Neyach, Lech Lecha. Not only that, he insisted on being Magiyah the Sichas, so they all came out Mugeh. And he said within the Sikha was weaved a Maimer as well, so it was a Maimer and a Sikha. And this was all, obviously the doctors were not so happy, because every time they gave the Rebbe a few minutes, he added double or triple. And those Sikhas began literally to double and triple. Chai Matzoi Chai Yesod was an hour and a half, I think. And then even more by Tzoi Shabbos Vayetze, long Sikhas. And that became the Kfiyas after that. And it was all from the Rebbe's room. Till Yutes Kislev, Rosh Chodesh Kislev, of course, the Rebbe went home, Lamed Ches, and Yutes Kislev was the first Fabrengen. The Rebbe came back down to 770. It's a very moving Fabrengen. It was shorter than the average Fabrengen, but the Rebbe came in. It was hard to describe the gefühl. The Rebbe walked into that Fabrengen, Yutes Kislev, Lamed Ches, and then the Rebbe continued the Fabrengens. But Mitzvah Shabbos became the new Seder. Instead of 1:30 Shabbos afternoon, it was after Shabbos. What time? 9:30.
Well, I think it depended. It might have been a little...
Oh, because of the winter and summer. Al Kaplan, the Sikhs was Mitzvah Shabbos. But it was very clear that wherever the Rebbe had an opportunity to smuggle in a Shabbos Fabrengen, he did it. Achros HaPesach, then Erev Shavuos Lamed Ches was Sunday. So Shabbos Bamidr, Erev Shavuos was a Fabrengen Shabbos. That was the first Fabrengen Shabbos after the heart attack. And then there was some more. I don't remember exactly which. Of course, the Shavuos. And then some others. Then this continued Lamed Tes, Tishrei Tes, but the Rebbe started finding opportunities where there were Fabrengens here and there, sporadic. The last Mitzvah Shabbos Fabrengen is Ve'eda Tovshin Mem. So I think Eil Chavdal Tevis. That was the last Fabrengen Tovshin Mem. And after that, all Fabrengens were Shabbos back then. There were never more Mitzvah Shabbos Fabrengens. I will share this, which I think is very important. Many people are not aware of this. This was really the Tkufa. I started formally writing Hanochas that Chanukah Tovshin Mem. So I remember when I was a Bocher in Tovshin Lamed Zayin, one night of Yechidus, someone came out of the Yechidus and he said to the Bocher, he said, "You don't believe what the Rebbe just said." And I was one of the people in the 770 that. And he says that he told the Rebbe that it had developed in the Spol from how much the Rebbe has accomplished and the expansion of the Rebbe's Pulas, Lamed Zayin. So the Rebbe said, "Noch gar nicht gesehen, mit sein gar anders noch Shas Ashlesh, Tovshin Mem. Begar another scale Tovshin Mem." And obviously today we see it was fulfilled. It wasn't just words. So I remember we always anticipated what's going to be. Then came Lamed Ches, which was Kavyochel, so to speak, a setback, and only to be proven not a setback. But after Tovshin Lamed Ches, after the Rebbe started Fabrengen and Tovshin Mem, Fabrengen's literally. That's why I asked before, what time? Fabrengen was till 4 o'clock. 4:30 was a late Fabrengen. After Tovshin Mem, Fabrengen 4:30. I don't think there was a Fabrengen anymore. 5:30 was regular. 6. Then there was the Devorim Shabbos Chazein Tovshin Mem was till 8 o'clock. Bolok Mem Gimel was also till 7:30, and of course Pinchas Mem Hey was till 8.
So when did the Mitzvah Shabbos Fabrengen end?
We said Mem.
I'd like to add one little thing about that is not known. The Rebbe's doctor, Dr. Bernard Lown, is my second cousin. I was the one who brought him the Chatchilu to the Rebbe. And over the course of the Lamed Ches, the whole winter Lamed Ches, he would come once a month. My father would pick him up, I would drive him to the airport, and I would debrief him, get information from him. Nobody knew anything. But I pressed a few buttons, and he told me some things, didn't tell me a lot, until somehow it came back to the Rebbetzin that Dr. Lown is telling Kaplan things that he shouldn't be knowing. And so he told me, this was sometime around Purim time, I can't tell you anything else. The Rebbetzin asked me not to speak. But he did tell me something, Elul Tovshin Lamed Ches. He told me that he told the Rebbe that he's got to stop Farbrengen on Shabbos. This thing of Shabbos of sitting until all kinds of hours, especially Shabbos Mevorchim. He doesn't make Kiddush and doesn't eat all day. He didn't make Kiddush by the Farbrengen and Shabbos Mevorchim. And it's too much for him, and he shouldn't do it. So like a few other things, which I'm not going to mention now, the Rebbe said, this is not negotiable. I'm quoting verbatim. This is not negotiable. So Dr. Lown says to him, why? It's your health. So he said, I'm quoting words again. Shabbos, the world is elevated. When I go down to the Elam, I elevate them, they elevate me, and Shabbos elevates everybody. It's not negotiable.
Rabbi Feller.
Let me add something just quickly. It happens to be, we're now Yud Shevat, 40 years from Yud Shevat Tavshin Lamed Zayin, and everybody here certainly learned the Basi Lagani. And you know, and that year there was a Maimer Shabbos, a Motzei Shabbos, and the Rebbe had them. It's a very unique way that the Rebbe was Magia the Maimer. But I want to point out that the Rebbe told them to use as the Yesod, the one that was at the foundation of the Maimer, that's the top of the page, the Maimer that was said on Motzei Shabbos. And he said because it was Bepirsum Yoiser. What does Bepirsum Yoiser mean? There wasn't necessarily that many more people by that Farbrengen, the Shabbos Dike Farbrengen, but Bepashtus, it means that was heard around the world simultaneously on the hookup. So the Rebbe called that Pirsum Yoiser a special thing, and he used that. Nevertheless, after Shmois and Voira, Tavshin Mem, he went back to Farbrengen on Shabbos. And it happens to be that my uncle Zeligson, Rabbi Shmuel, actually wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and he said, Taka started at Nesius, but the Farbrengen is now able to be heard by thousands of people more than once present, and maybe the Rebbe should continue. And nevertheless, the Rebbe said, "Kavonosei detzuya." You have good intention to your question, but nevertheless, I have to go back to Farbrengen on Shabbos. And many things, Rabbi Jacobson mentioned that in Tavshin Lamed Beis, the Rebbe reckoned out things that he stopped or he changed. Usually, when the Rebbe changed or stopped something, he didn't go back. I'll give you just another example. In Tavshin Lamed Ches, the Rebbe started to sit by Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos, so he sat always. Although one thing he did go back, and he used to sit by Kabbalah Shabbos. But after a certain time, the Rebbe started again to stand on Kabbalah Shabbos. So there was a couple things that the Rebbe changed back to the original. Just till Rabbi Pearson comes with his other question, I figured it will like everyone's going off the thing here. So I just want to talk about a slight detail, but to give it a little bit of perspective. You know, in the Dayenu, we say, Ilu Kerbonu Lifnei HaSinai. That's already Dayenu. If we just come, and I want to just describe for a moment a little bit of the feeling before the Rebbe's Farbrengen and afterwards, especially on a weekday Farbrengen and a big one, and in the later years in the Mems, and the later Mems, and when we made that little joke about the texting before, how they used to reserve places. It happens to be that I used to hold a place for my father, was gesund by the Farbrengen in the Shvil. I used to sit many times next to Rebbe Jacobson for whatever reason. He didn't get someone to hold it. But his father used to actually bring along work and work at holding the place. The people were all very happy when I got out and my father got in. They all had a little bit more room. But anyway, that being said, there was a certain the Hoibina feeling. But as it came closer to the Farbrengen started 9:30 in those years. As it came closer to 9 o'clock, it was already a certain attention, a certain seriousness. There's soon going to be a Farbrengen. People, the mikveh was always open till 9:30. The mikveh down the street, like Rabbi, and people did make achonis, and people learned, and then there was filling up, it was pushing, it was packed, and when the Rebbe came in, it was already full, and it was a whole different aura. Just the entrance of the Rebbe to the Farbrengen, the anticipation, and then the Rebbe coming in. But another thing so there was a certain pressure, tense, till the Farbrengen started. But I want to speak a little bit about after the Farbrengen, when the Rebbe went out. And part of the crowd went out, but then you used to see groups getting together, and where the Farbrengen was, there was less people. People were talking over things that they Rebbe discussed, friends who didn't see friends, groups of Bochrim of different ages coming together. And it was, even though it was a weekday Farbrengen and everything was recorded, but people were already talking about what the Rebbe spoke in little groups of Chazorah, and not just Chazorah, but where it comes in perspective to things that the Rebbe said. And then there was the Torah, there was the Nigle, and there was the Chassidus, etc. With that, what was the question?
Was the Farbrengen Mitzvah Shabbos different? Were they structured the same as the Shabbos Farbrengen?
I'll address it a little bit, although all the scholars here can probably address it better. But let me just start with saying that it actually was. And the reason why I want to discuss it, because I really want to discuss the structure of a Farbrengen in general.
Yeah, that was.
If you'll allow me to also start with a story that in around Tafshin Chaf or so, they came to the Rebbe, the Hatzor from the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael, that for Yutas Kislev they were able to have a half hour of airtime on the radio in Eretz Yisrael, that the Rebbe should talk in Yutas Kislev. It was very popular in those years. Thousands of people used to come to Kfar Chabad. It was a big thing, and they could get airtime for the Rebbe to talk on the radio. And the Rebbe said that he was going to go to the oil, and he gave them an answer. When he came back, he said, "I'm not going to do it. He can't record it." And he said, "Because when I speak about the day, it's on the day, and it's at that time." And I wanted to just address the fact that everyone here learns the Farbrengens from the different years, and you'll see that the first Sikha and then even the second Sikha of most Farbrengens share great similarities, because the Rebbe speaks about the potency and the power and the significance of the day that the Farbrengen is taking place. So always the first Sikha usually spoke about the occasion and how it was. Then the Rebbe went on, either there was two Sikhas, and then there was a certain Kufa, there was a third Sikha sometimes, but then there was always the Maimer. Then afterwards the order went with the Rashi Sikha and sometimes the questions of the Rashi.
After Chafei. Right.
Well, yeah, I'm talking in the later years. And then the Rashi, everybody knows the Seder because everybody learns the Farbrengens. And in the order that you see it is the order that it went. Now, the answer to your question, the Motzei Shabbos Farbrengen, that's you could see there's video and there's recording of it, and that basically was in the order of a Shabbos Dike Farbrengen.
Yeah. So what the order was, just to detail some more detail, was there was the first Sikha usually was about, let's say, it's Shabbos Pasha B'Shalach, Shabbos Shira. Let's say, and then the second Sikh would be the specific Kfiyas. This year, Shira is Tu B'Shvat. Sometimes it would be a little different, but that was usually the Seder. Not so often, but once in a while, the Rebbe, sometimes the second Sikh would be completely unique. The Rebbe would talk about a subject or something he was asked. Sometimes about Mashiach and the Mems, interesting Sikhs. And then there was a Maimer Kain Sikha. I should mention, of course, that you may know the Maimer is the two types of Maimerim. They have the formal Maimer where they sing a nigun and everybody stood up and the Rebbe take a handkerchief. And then the Rebbe, I think Yud Gimel was the first time that he said Maimer Kain Sikha, rein schmuggeln. So you shouldn't have to have Nish Matriach Zayin Eich and Nish Matriach Zayin Mir. The Rebbe, the concept of a Maimer Kain Sikha. The truth is the Rebbe Rashab also has a Maimer Kain Sikha. But the Rebbe used that in later years. Maimer Kain Sikha became more common, where there was no nigun and there was
a handkerchief.
A handkerchief always, yeah. There's no
but
nigun.
It was structured as a Maimer.
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah, the Dibra Maskil.
Yeah. Dibra Maskil, you can see it was a Maimer.
Everything.
Yeah, it was everything like a Maimer. It just didn't have the nigun. There's details. I mean, to understand the Ruchnisdike difference, we'll leave that for another time. But I will say this: that so the Rebbe then there came the Maimer. After the Maimer was the Rashi, the Horace and Zeyar. But the Horace and Zeyar went through a few tkufas. In Tafshin Chav Tes, the Rebbe started speaking Biyurim in Kutlev Yitzchok and Ageres HaTshuva. Then he started Biyurim in Ageres HaTshuva itself. Then he went to the Kutlev Yitzchok and Zoyar. And that's how that remained until, of course, Memches, which we'll talk about shortly, the Shinuyim then. And so then, so Rebbe would ask, after the Maim would be Kirogel Rashi, he would ask questions on the Zohar. In the weeks of Pirkei Avos, the Rebbe would ask questions on Pirkei Avos, and then began Sichos, each one answering in that order, in a very orderly, structured way, almost without exception.
And later on about the Rambam.
After Mendel, after Mem Hey, Mendel Mem Hey. Yeah.
So the Rebbe would say a Sikh on the Rambam's from Achron Shal Pesach.
Not Achron Shal Pesach, no. I don't
Later.
The first one, a few months
Right
into the.
right in the beginning. He
Right
spoke
in
the
the
Halacha Yemes.
Yeah.
Halacha from the Gimel Pro.
Right. Now, in the Gimel, another thing that's interesting in the Lamed Daled, Lamed Hey, Lamed Gimel already, the Rebbe started Bein Amtzorim. And the years Lamed Vov, Lamed Zayin, those years the Rebbe also has explained the Inyan and Hilchos Beis Abchira, sometimes from Michel, and Sech Midas. The Rebbe's Kochen Zechalad, then so there's a whole bunch of sikhs on that. That kufa. The mems as they rolled on, this was the structure. The Fabringens, as I said before, were long. Mem Aleph, of course, was a whole new Shnas Hakel. The Rebbe introduced then Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, to dance in the streets. The Rebbe spoke then about Hakel very strongly. And that year also, Mem Aleph was after Vayeshev, I think there was a Fabringen every Shabbos as well. Mem Aleph is, if you look at the Sichas Kodesh, is the one with the most hours of cumulative hours. Mem Ches, just go to the Mem Ches, because I think that Kufa of the Rebbitzins is Talkus, of course.
We'll get to that in a moment. Okay. So, Rabbi Felder, what was the routine or the atmosphere before Fabringen on Shabbos, especially after Chal B'Shvat, when they became the norm that the Rebbe would bring every Shabbos? What was the atmosphere after davening? People would go home to make Kiddush. What was the whole...
Rabbi Kaplan mentioned earlier that if you didn't come 7:30 in the morning, you had a problem getting in a place. But in the early noons already, people would come already Friday night. There were several. I have reason to know I used to be there, and they were people who literally sat.
You were there
from
since Friday night.
They would sit from 1, 2 o'clock in the morning Friday night in a place to make sure they had a place. Not a lot, but there were several. But already at 6 o'clock it started to fill up, and 7 o'clock, and people davened in that place. They wouldn't move from that place. In other words, they davened there. If they got wine and something to make kiddush, and if not, they didn't. It didn't matter. Then when they would have to go to the restroom, forgive me. So they would have somebody. You sit here for 3 minutes. Give me 3 minutes. I come back. So you stay here, and when I come back,
6, 7 in the morning was filling up.
Full. And there were even the Mekaymis Kavuyim. People had to hold them ki'ilu, because there was also a place. There were a few benches designated, quote unquote, for orchim, and there were sometimes the Bada Masada did hold a few benches, like taped down, because a group came, let's say, from Toronto or Montreal or whatever it was. So there was a shtickle seder, but nevertheless, as soon as the Rebbe went out, you have to also realize that they had to take away the bima of Kriyas HaTorah, and they had to also the benches that to the Rebbe's right had to be turned around, because for the davening, for whatever reason, it wasn't allowed to be facing the wrong way at the davening. It used to face forward, those benches. So there was a designated bachram that would pick it up. One of the Rabbi Shmulevich, he was a shliach in Eretz Yisrael. He was ill and he passed on, but he was one of the ones who used to move the benches. Then it was a big guy, and with other guys, and it was interesting to see how they did it with their full shul. And people would be sitting in those benches, davening, facing the other way, and they wouldn't move out of the place, even for the purpose. Rabbi Kaplan used to sit in those places.
What was this? Can you
they used to all stay in there. They were already davening there, facing one way, but even when they had to move the bench to change around, nobody went away. Everything stood up. So the bench had to reserve the places. Had to walk out, and it had to be put back in the other way.
That's right.
See? Change on the fly here.
Oops.
Something similar.
Rabbi Zeligson.
Yeah, something like that. But that's what they did, and then the bench would come back in, and they would say, "Watch your head," and everyone helped lower it down.
Nothing was miraculous like the shift from the Fabringen before Akofis.
And actually in Tov Shinun Beis, the Rebbe in Tov Shinun Beis, actually the Rebbe came in about 15 minutes early, and the shul was really not yet set up. It was still in the middle of the setup.
He took a look.
It was. But all the years before that, there was a miraculous turnaround.
So how did you?
Simchas Torah, they used to actually sit on the ches. So one year, I remember the Rebbe came in. The Rebbe looked to his right, and the people that were sitting to the Rebbe's right were, let's say, a foot higher. So it really had an appearance of them standing at full height. So the Rebbe went, like the Rebbe's motion, that they could sit down. And then I think Rabbi Goren, somebody went over and told the Rebbe that they're really all sitting, but they're on a raised platform. So the Rebbe wanted people to sit.
So after the Verbringen, people would go home to make Kiddush? How was that?
A few select few. Some people went home or went somewhere close by to make Kiddush for whatever reason, before the Verbringen. But a lot of the Olam made
So Suda Shabbos by day didn't exist?
After, first of all, in the winter was Motzei Shabbos. Yeah. And in the summer it was like a late, after the Verbringen. Most
many cholents were not eaten.
Cholent was eaten on Motzei Shabbos. As a matter of fact, I believe when the Shluchim went to Eretz Yisrael...
No, I don't think we need to get into details.
When Rabbi Jacobson held a big Suda Shabbos in his home where the Chayzerim used to chazer the Verbringen. After in the summer months especially, and there was a big chazorah, and they had cholent. He maybe didn't need it, but there was. But anyway, actually, when the shluchim went to Eretz Yisrael, I think there was a word to be said that these bochrim don't eat cholent Shabbos. They didn't eat cholent for a certain amount of time. It was a deep word for the Yerushalmi people to try to bagreif with what they're dealing with. That's a whole different story.
All right, just moving on. Rabbi Harlig, when did the minhag start to give the Rebbe a bottle of mashke Erev Shabbos, or to bring into Maskiris Erev Shabbos in order to be machris by the Shabbos Verbringen about your pu'ula or your chasana, etc.?
In the beginning, it was that people went over in the middle of the Verbringen and giving a bottle for this, for that, for that.
This started already from the beginning of the Nesius?
No, later. I think at the end of the Yud. And then it took up too much time. So they decided instead of that, everybody should give in a bottle before. They wrote in a zettel for what it is. And then the Rebbe, when they came Shabbos, they just went over and took the bottle. And later
this was for personal simchas, Rabbi Harlig is talking about.
Even for
Meistus.
For Meistus.
Started in the Lamed, he started.
Yeah.
The Chovsa was still Gestalt Mash.
Yeah. And then he started that everybody should announce for what the bottle is.
Rabbi Fel, do you have anything to add?
You're talking about the mashke.
Yeah.
So the every
just to repeat it in your days how to.
No, but in my days it was very finished. That's why I wanted it to be very important. That Rabbi Harlig said there was the personal birthdays. Then it went down. The Rebbe, I think, spoke one Shabbos. I don't remember what Shabbos.
In the early years, you had a birthday. You approached the Rebbe by the Verbringen with a bottle of mashke.
In the early Lamed.
He once said, "Patet me the Zeit."
Yeah. But at one point, the Rebbe stopped. The chosen. It only was left to a chosen. Got a bottle still, and bar mitzvahs I think stopped.
You're talking about a lot later. I remember there was a tkufa. I don't remember the years. Maybe Rabbi Kaplan. Where any birthday, Yom Haledes, whether bar mitzvah or no bar mitzvah, went over to the Rebbe with a cup, not with a bottle.
We as kids we used to go over to the Rebbe before bar mitzvah, because after bar mitzvah you went into yechidus anyway. Before bar mitzvah, when you had a Yom Haledes, you used to go and buy a nigen between siches and with a cup and say l'chaim, and the Rebbe gave l'chaim and took wunschen. That was standard.
But the bottles per se, a bar mitzvah bocher went and a chosen. And then it stopped officially. The Rebbe said it's going to stop.
No, in Mendel, the Rebbe said a very sharp eisprach. Menishkim vodka tailor. If you remember.
A schenker maybe?
Yeah, that he does not. He says ich tail mashkin, he's vodka. Because then every Tom, Dick, and Harry basically had something. They burped. They went up with a bottle of mashkin.
So again, Rabbi Feld, how would it
only the sibus of kedusha?
He said patet me the Zeit.
So again,
so then it became that for special occasions of afotas amayonas and these kind of things, that's who got the bottles. And sometimes the Rebbe actually brought the bottles. He said, "Isarusa de leila." A lot of times you see that in the sikhs. The Rebbe said there's going to be such and such a thing. They should come up for mashke. Sometimes the Rebbe gave for Eretz Yisrael and for different things. But then in the later years, it became the Seder, that if somebody made a dinner, or a Mlava Malka, or something for an occasion, a concert, or only moizdis, and only for something for a Fatzis Amayonis, they would bring the bottle before Shabbos to the Maskiris with a little letter, And then the Maskiris brought down the mashke already to the Farbrengen, and then the Rebbe would say, "Die alle some zugestellte Butlach, Meile Geinoibin, whatever the Rebbe, different things that you see the Rebbe said in the Farbrengen." And at that point, people went up. Also, the Bachrim who were going to Russia in the Tkufa of the later Mems and till through the early Nuns, they used to go up for all the Farbrengen. And you wanted to know, because Russia was a big secret, it was everything, because it was officially dangerous and a secret and all that. So they were the only ones who didn't have to make an announcement. So how did you know if a Bocher is going to Russia? If a Bocher went up there and got mashke and didn't make an announcement, it means, oh, he's going to Russia. Right? So that was the cat was out of the bag, Muzak. But nevertheless, no announcements were made. The Rebbe did not want that an announcement should be made from the table about something going on in Russia in Soviet times. And otherwise...
Would this work at a weekday Farbrengen as well?
There was the mashke on a weekday Farbrengen was special occasions, and I believe from Isarusa de Leila also only.
And at a certain point, if I'm not mistaken, that ended.
The Rebbe called up people who made a achlata to make a Farbrengen. I believe there's even a video of that, but that was Isarusa de Leila mamash. It was a gilui.
Yeah, it was exceptions.
A gilui.
And did this come to an end at a certain time and point?
No, the Shabbos by Yakel there were many bottles. Vayakel Nun Beis had many bottles there. The Kinas HaShluchim Tov Nun Beis, I think, was the record. If I remember correctly, it was 57 bottles, but I don't remember exactly. Yeah, something like that. I might be wrong. Something like that. And,
so just by the Farbrengen itself, Rabbi Jacobson, how did a chassid stand for 5-6 hours, have koyach to stand for so long by the Rebbe's Farbrengen?
You have to ask a chassid that question. I can tell you how I figured it out.
A person.
I mean, I can't speak for everybody. I guess different people had different ways. I'm sure some people it was pure Kabbalah sale, and that was that. Some people were interested in what the Rebbe had to say. Simply as that.
Some people had rubber soles.
For myself, I was able to be a chezer and a maniach, so I really didn't have a choice. It was more, for me, the challenge was not standing, the challenge was remembering. Standing was the easy part. The remembering was the big difficulty, and that was, I mean, I could just speak for myself. It was, to me, it was like, I think Rabbi Kaplan mentioned, look, Moshe Rabbeinu was coming down from Har Sinai with a Gili Chodesh, Gili Elikus, and he's saying things that are said for the first time ever, and you'll never hear them again. That, I think, is a pretty big motivator if you respect the Rebbe. And that, I think, is a pretty good reason to stand and listen. That's how I see it. It wasn't difficult.
Sometimes it was very pushy. It wasn't easy also. So the bigger Farbrengens, it was a tough thing to do. But you know what? It never entered anybody's mind. I think it was part of what it says in the Mishnah that no one said, Charlie Amokim. You know, the
most difficult was, of course, Simchas Teda. Simchas Teda, when it was Kfiyas, that Simchas Teda was Friday.
Shabbos, yeah.
So then there was a Farbrengen Thursday night, 4 Kofis, a Farbrengen Friday evening, Farbrengen 1:30 Shabbos, and a Farbrengen before the Shkia Shabbos afternoon.
4 Farbrengens.
4 Farbrengens. And
not to mix it up.
And L'chaims. And the dancing was not exactly conducive. It was very difficult. I remember the last hour of Simchas Teda Farbrengen before a Kofis, my time, it was almost impossible to hear the Rebbe. Rabbi would always be signaling to me, and I remember I would move up very close up in the shvil, mamish inches from the Rebbe, because the noise in the shul, first of all...
That was the only time, by the way. There was always a big decor.
Yeah.
Only Simchas Teda, because people were coming back. People coming back from Talucha. The benches.
But more than that, the women's shul thought it was already Hakofis. They didn't even know. Because they didn't even know what was going on. So the noise was I remember that was
an exception.
Remember Shashtil the Melech Shloft?
There was always, The Rebbe said that on Simchas Teda, actually.
Yeah, Shashtil the Melech Shloft. And
that's when he turned over the cup.
Yeah, when he turned over the cup.
That was Tavshim Memvov, I believe.
And then the end of the Farbrengen, I was going to say, to tell the story, in case you're not familiar. So the Rebbe then spoke a whole thing about he turned over the cup, and he asked everybody to turn over the cup. He gave a whole beer on it with the Gvim from the Meneda, the Mashpia. And it was such a tumult, because remember, there were those that heard the Rebbe, saw the Rebbe, but there was a lot of people standing in 770 that couldn't see or hear the Rebbe. So they didn't even know, is it a Sicha, is it a Niggin? And here the Rebbe made the thing, and Mezingt that Niggin, and then the Rebbe wants to speak suddenly. It's not like suddenly everyone knew, still. It wasn't that way. So everyone said, Shah, Shah, Shah. The Rebbe then smiled and said the following, and this also almost no one heard. The Rebbe said there was once a king, a melech. He went to sleep, so he had a masharis, and he was making sure he was outside. He made sure to be quiet, to let the king sleep. The melech zol shlof. So there was a bigger king, and he had several masharim. So they all made shash til, the melech shlof. So then there was the biggest king. He had so many masharim, made shash til, the melech shlof. They woke him up because there were so many people saying shash til. That was the Rebbe's reaction, the Simchas Teda. So the last hour, to be honest, was extremely difficult to hear. And I remember for me it was like, if we don't hear it, we're not going to be able to write it. And that to me was like impossible. I felt the achrayas, because if we don't write it down, it's lost forever. And that's a big motivator. I'm talking now from Pechina of Chazara and so on.
Rabbi,
I just go over, I think it's important, if you don't mind. I was going to go over, since time is limited, and you can fill in some details. So things changed in Memches. And this, of course, is both sad and there's a combination of many feelings when you talk about this Kufa. So, but before that said, when was the last big Fabrengen?
The last week, the Fabrengen was 2 Bishvat of Shememches. Yeah. Chamish also Bishvat of Shememches.
And that's before Chav Bishvat.
A week before.
So you just Kislev Memches.
If I'm not mistaken, the Rebbe was middle being Magid when he heard the news of the Rebbetzin.
But before that, already in Memvov Memzayin there was Shinuyim. If Yutas Kislev was sometimes on Sunday, the Fabrengen was only Shabbos.
Tovshim Memzayin, the Rebbe wrote an answer. He's Vada Shalil Leiti every Yutas Kislev. Whatever. There was a Fabrengen in the end, but it was not on cable. It was not on a regular
cable. But there was some other
Fabrengen.
that the Rebbe did not do in the weekday, did it on Shabbos instead, right?
Yeah, when it was close to Shabbos.
Yeah. So then Memches came Chav Shvat, of course, and the truth is the Shinuyim did not happen right away. That Shabbos there was a Havamina the Rebbe would not Fabreng Mishpatim because it was the middle of Shiva. The Rebbe was home, obviously sitting Shiva. But then last minute, Friday afternoon, the Rebbe was coming to 7:70, and we knew there'd be a Fabrengen. And it was a very regular Fabrengen. I mean, he spoke about the Rebbetzin, about Gilgulim and all that, but it was a Fabrengen with the same structure. Rashi, Zehar, everything was the same structure. Then came Pesach. After Pesach, I remember vividly. Sazirim would say it was the Shabbos after Pesach. And suddenly the Rebbe, and this was so clear because all the years, as I said before, the structure was very clear. Rashi, Zeyar, Pirkei Avos, Rambam, there was no mixing. And suddenly, Mesazim would say that, I remember listening, and the Rebbe suddenly connects the Rashi to the Zeyar. And like I started answering the question, answering both of them together. It was like different. They didn't know where it was going. Then the weeks after that, slowly it started changing completely, where the Rebbe then stopped even saying Rashis, and then stopped Zeyars and Pirkei Avos.
Let me just add.
Chukas Memches. Let me just please fill in because I
just want to say that, a technical thing. After that Pashas Mishpatim, for the next 3 Shabboses, there was no Fabrengen.
Right.
That was Shabbos Vorchim, that Mishpatim. Then afterwards, the Rebbe did Fabreng, and he said he's going to Fabreng.
Bis Mashiach et Kumen.
Thank you, Rabbi Harlig.
Yeah. But the Shinuyim happened, Sazim is saying. Now, we saw the Shinuyim, it was very, very clear. Then, of course, which Shabbos was the Fabrengen, the first one, the short Fabrengen? Maybe Achrei Meis. Those weeks. Suddenly, remember, it was around 3:15, and the Fabrengens, I told you, went till 5 o'clock, sometimes 6 o'clock. 3:15, the Rabbi Tolashevsky, Chazan Tolashevsky stands up and starts singing Yehirot. The Rebbe makes them to sing Yehirot. 3:15. And I remember everyone blamed him. He stood up, so the Rebbe felt he has to sing. He can move in a posture, there's nothing to do. The Rebbe doesn't want him to sing, he's not going to sing. But he sang to this, and that from then on, Fabrengen started ending 3 o'clock.
I just want to move on to more. I just want to move on to more general questions.
No, one second. Let me just finish one more thing. Then came the summer. Chukas Memches was the last mimer that the Rebbe said in Be'efin Kavua that we were able to identify. Even my morim began to disappear, so to speak. So we didn't know whether it was Chukas for sure. So I'll just share this at the end of the year when we presented to the Rebbe Sefer Mamorim Tavshim Memches. So the last mimer is Chukas. So we wrote to the Rebbe that we're not sure whether Chukas is the last mimer, and since we're printing the Sefer, we want to confirm. So the Rebbe didn't answer yes or no. He just crossed out the question mark, he left it, and added a date to the Sefer Mamorim. So basically, Chukas Memches. Of course, there were Mamorim Memtes, Erev Pesach, Erev Shavuos, from the Stende with a Nigan, and then there was a few other Mamorim, Chaysor and Neach, in the later years. But Mamorim really ended Beifin Kavua Memches. I just wanted to give that final picture.
Okay, Rabbi Harlig, how do we know when the Rebbe would Fabrengen in the early years? What was like the simon in the for Shabbos Fabrengens? What was like the simon before?
The early years, there were standards when the Rebbe verbring. Every Shabbos Mevachem, Ayema de Pagra, Chafov.
There was no surprises.
No surprises the first years. Yud Kislev it was, Yud Shevat, Purim.
Now, how would we know when the Rebbe would forbring? If there was no surprise in general, what about later on in the Lamas?
Later on, the way we
There were any Ramazim?
was Rashi, the Rashi Sichos.
Yeah,
After
later
Chafei,
on.
when the Gabbai would announce, and he would look at the Rebbe, if the Rebbe walked out before he announced Mincha, meant there's going to be a Fabrengen.
Yeah.
If the Rebbe waited, when he announced Mincha, there would be, means there's no Fabrengen.
Now, in Gore later years, the Rebbe would say in the morning on the way into Shacharis, and then people would run around to all the shuls. This was Mem Zayin, that Kufa, because it wasn't always a Fabrengen. The Rebbe actually was Mediyah Shabbos morning. There's going to be a Fabrengen.
Then there was also another Kufa where he was Mediyah to Waldman. But there's a Rashi. So that was basically an indicator. There was, of course, that Shabbos, a very sad Shabbos, where they announced a Rashi, and the Rebbe became very upset.
But he spoke about it the next Shabbos.
Vayikra Chavtes. I think it was Chavtes.
I think about reason. It was up test, meant to test.
You can look it up. Listen, you can look it up.
But that shows also the line with the Rebbe. You say it's Nesinosim Sinai, so a head yet can't just say Sinai is giving Torah today. You know, that was what the Rebbe.
I remember. I was a kid. I remember the Rebbe running out from the stender. It was how upset the Rebbe was. Nicht gehen von da mit sich dann
eben. Mit Jakob sein davenen mit nicht davenen der Woche kommen in Mezon.
It was a bad scene. Then the Rebbe, there was no Fabrengen the next Shabbos. Then the Shabbos afterwards, there was a Fabrengen, and the Rebbe said, then the Sicha Kol HaKayis. And then the Rebbe said, since Hashgacha Pratis has been given,
he did explain the Rashi.
So before Shabbos, you wouldn't know if there would be a Fabrengen?
No.
When you were learning...
Shabbos Revarchim always, and Yom de Pagra always. But there were times absolutely not.
Through Mem Zayin.
For
From the beginning of Mem Ches, as a matter of fact.
And
Yudalit Kislev, Tafshi, when it was 25 years, Yudalit.
Yeah.
So when the Rebbe was going out of the davening, Pinyaltos went over to him. It said the Rebbe Fabrengen today. It was his son Zupu.
Right.
So the Rebbe, he told the Rebbe, he's in Meshulik Chatchonis. It him up on the Chatchonis. Mit dem Verbringen. So, the Rebbe came, he verbring, and then later, after he verbringen, Ogezol the Shatchanes, when in Gleich.
So, Rabbi Jacobson,
when... About surprises, I just want to throw out, even the later years, the Rebbe seemed to have a particular pleasure to surprise people, even when he had the Komine called the Malachi, what do we call them, the bouncers that would follow the Rebbe everywhere without mentioning names. So there was the surprises were like this. Purim Mem Aleph was Friday. The Rebbe said a Meir after Mincha. Told them to lock the doors.
There?
I was upstairs. Mamish upstairs. I was a bocher, but I didn't even know about it.
I mean, they're just very limited
then
time.
Then there was Yud Gimel.
Yud Pesach
from the porch in this. The Birchas Hachama was that year too, but that wasn't.
Erev Pesach Tovshin
Then of course Nosei Tovshin Nun Aleph.
The bus will be coming in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to ask you more closely questions. So when would the Rebbe start being Magia every single Fabrengen? From what week on?
Every single began in Mem Ches. In Mem Zayin began almost every one.
And Mem Vav also even.
Yeah, no, Mem Vav, Mem Zayin began more Kviyazdik, but Mamish every week was Mem Ches. Mem Zayin, actually, the first Sefer Bereshis, Magia, both versions.
So in Sefer Sichos, that's entire Fabrengens.
Sefer Sichos Mem Zayin exists because there were so many Mugadik Sichos, Mem Ches, Mem Tes, and then after that, every Shabbos there was Magia, every Fabrengen.
Just to conclude...
Except one, Vayakel Pekudei Mem Ches.
Just to conclude, what can you share with the Bachrim, the experience that you had standing by the Rebbe's Fabrengen? How can you give that over to the Bachrim today in a way that they can feel that as well? Rabbi Feller first.
Obviously, the Rebbe says, I was Fabrengen yesterday with Chassid Shahid, and when it's the Rebbe is Kula Ruchnis anyway, so it's not Negeya, the Hagbolis of the Zman, or the Mokim, or the Guf, and whatever it is, and like you see, the there's a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Rebbe in Chelik Tezvov where he says you can also be part of it, you can experience it, like Rabbi Kaplan was saying earlier, when you close your eyes, it's really forever, it's inyan nitzchi, and it's like it's given today, like Rabbi Jacobson said, Nesinosim Sinai, so ma lahalon, be'ema v'yira v'desa v'ziyah, means the whole time, and certainly, if this is how the Rebbe is giving it now, then certainly we have it now, and fakert. I watch the Bochrim to see how to have it now.
Jacobson? I second what you say. At the end of the day, tonight's Yud Shevat, and if you listen to the Maimon Basaligani Tovshin Yud Aleph, which I wasn't here, and Rabbi Feller wasn't here, but you could hear it if you really you imagine yourself standing with the Rebbe. The Maimon is Meididik. Especially when the end there, when the Rebbe starts crying and talking about himself. So I think it's a matter of all about the simas lev, as the Rebbe says. If you really commit yourself, time and space doesn't make a difference. Thank God, and maybe that's why Bashgacha Plotis we have all the recordings. Obviously, we all want to have the Neshama Beguf for Hu Yigalenu here, Begashmias, but this is clearly our Nesayin of our time. There's no question that a person can live with the Rebbe. I could say from the Fabrengens, it was Gili Alakus Mamish. Every Fabrengen, some Fabrengens you saw more than others, and all these things remain Nitzchim today. I'm echoing what Rabbi Feller said, and I think our challenge is to, even those of us that were standing there, is to Kol Yem Beinecha Chadashim, that we should experience it today exactly as it was then. At the end of the day, remember, it's not about the experience alone, it's also the Teitzahs. The Rebbe always would say, many, many times, it all comes down to whether it comes down to action. Udin and the shaman, but the Rebbe would sometimes be very harsh even on himself, that it doesn't come into action. It means that the speaker spoke Dvarim Chmona Litzlan that are not...
Rebbe wanted to have a pale mamish, have a pum
exactly.
Question mark.
So that's the evidence.
About Fabrengens, they wrote, X amount of people tuned in, X amount of people viewed the Fabrengen, and they would give a duch, how many people, when especially it was on cable or whatever it was, and the Rebbe wrote several times, underlined twice, Habepum question mark. What's the pale mamish? What's the action? What happened from the deed of this Fabrengen?
Thank you very, very much. The bus will be here in 5 minutes. Everyone can enjoy refreshments in the back. And anyone who has any questions can come up now to ask the panelists. Thank you very much, the panelists. And if you can please help stack up the chairs.